In this segment, Stephanie Miller is joined by Glenn Kirschner. Together, the two discuss the radical assaults on how the federal government works.
Speaking of that man villain, Stephen Miller says Trump is actively looking at suspending habeas corpus because, of course, he is. Our friend Tristan Snell tweeted right away, this would allow government to arrest, exile, detain, even kill any of us with no trial, no lawyer, no judge even ever hearing from you. It would be the death of freedom in America. Here we are, another day, another outrageous
the writ of habeas corpus, or the great writ as it is known, is to try to prevent our government from unlawfully jailing us, unconstitutionally detaining us. So, of course, Stephen Miller says he wants to suspend, the Trump administration is looking to suspend that right of the American people not to be unlawfully detained. Why? Because he thinks it will assist in Donald Trump's deportation efforts. So think about it. Stephen Miller announced that he wants to violate the Constitution to try to help Donald Trump violate the Constitution by, violating due process rights of the people they're trying to ship off to prisons in foreign lands. Now, this will not stand, at least not in the courts, because you can only suspend the writ of habeas corpus in times of rebellion or invasion. Think the attack on Pearl Harbor. They don't have it here. It doesn't mean they won't try to do it, but I believe the courts will say, sports, stand down. You can't do it.
Ron Filipowski made a good point, I thought, Glenn. He said, MAGA thinks Dems upset about the Trump administration suspending the writ of habeas corpus, which is essentially declaring martial law, is a self-owned since Lincoln did it during the Civil War. Yes, it was designed for things like a civil war, not for judicial decisions you disagree with. I mean, yes, we are not
and it was even
at
ruled
war.
It was ruled unconstitutional
Right.
when Lincoln did it as well. But yes, it's only been invoked a handful of times when arguably we were involved in a rebellion or an invasion. We are not. And Steph, that judge, they just tried to do this with the Tren de Aragua, right? The Venezuelan gang. Even that, the court has ruled, the federal judge has ruled, no, we're not being invaded by Venezuela. You can't do it.
Right.
So this is like trying to violate the Constitution on steroids. You can't do it.
Well, I mean, here's the ridiculous. Stephen Miller said, look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. Obviously, courts are the arbiters of what the right thing is in the United States. So, I mean, the levels of how ridiculous this is. I mean, it's allowed only when the U.S. has been invaded, as you say, or during an insurrection, which would not allow people to challenge their incarceration in court if they're arrested or detained. I mean, okay, I'm not even sure what my question is.
Yeah,
I'm just
but Steph, take some comfort in the fact that the federal judges, including lots of Republican-appointed judges and Trump-appointed judges, are holding strong and telling Trump over and over again, you can't do it, can't do it, can't do it. So that is that's a point of light we need to remain focused on.
Yeah, I want to get your take on what Senator Amy Klobuchar said yesterday.
I've made very clear that we are heading closer to one, but the reason we're not in a constitutional crisis like we have been at any moment, other moments in our country, like, say, the Civil War, when the states were actually dividing and seceding, we are not in a constitutional crisis because of the courts of this country. Over 100 of them, including multiple Trump-appointed judges, have stood up and said, hey, this is unconstitutional.
Okay, but is she correct? Because we're not at the compliance part. As you and I always talk about, sure, the courts are holding in many places, but they're not complying. So doesn't that make it a constitutional crisis?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a constitutional crisis light, which sounds like an oxymoron, but because he has not been complying with lower court orders in a timely fashion, right? He was ordered to facilitate the return of Abrigo Garcia.
Right, that's Supreme Court. That's not a lower court. That's Supreme Court.
That is. But because the lower court, because the Supreme Court was so mealy-mouthed, and, we want you to facilitate, but we don't want you to effectuate. We want you to do it, but we don't want you to do it in a way that would insult the foreign policy prerogatives. So we are there. Listen, we are, in fact, in a constitutional crisis, but it hasn't come into full focus yet. But Steph, the Supreme Court, at least 7 justices, need to put their dang foot down and say, okay, you didn't get the picture there, sport. Now we are telling you to return Abrego Garcia on a date certain. Here's the date. Don't do it. And then we're going to begin contempt proceedings and start throwing people in jail for violating court orders. That's what this has to come down to.
The Supreme Court is saying we'd like you to obey the law, but we don't want to be, rude about it. Right. Chris and I have one dream remaining, and that is that some judge uses the word sport in one of his rulings.
Please?
Can't do that, sport.
Yeah.
Or champ. That's fine, too. Okay. Speaking of wins, Trump administration must halt much of its dramatic downsizing of the federal workforce. A California judge, California, ruled on Friday. Judge Susan Ilston of San Francisco issued the emergency order in a lawsuit filed by labor unions and cities, one of multiple legal challenges. The court holds the president likely must request congressional cooperation to order the changes he seeks. So here we are yet again, right?
Yeah, and once he starts outright just kind of trying to destroy our constitutional construct of government where the executive branch has to abide by rulings of the federal courts regarding whether what the president is trying to do is constitutional or unconstitutional, that's when I think the tide turns even more than it has turned against him. And regarding the sport thing, yes, let's keep hope alive. But let's not forget, Judge Beryl Howell said, in a cringeworthy twist on the Shakespeare line, first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. She said, and I quote, Donald Trump has turned it into, let's kill all the lawyers I don't like.
Yeah.
That's some pretty strong language from a federal court judge.
Yeah. Well, I like my law, happy clappy. And I wanted to echo something Pete Buttigieg said that it sounds like something you've said. He said Trump can, in fact, be stopped from breaking the law. He said recent legal setbacks for Trump show some of the president's executive orders and other moves can, in fact, be stopped. So he was talking, he said some of the important setbacks and defeats of the Trump White House have been fighting it out on turf that hasn't been politically strong for us. He said he cited the federal judge's ruling about the USAID. Anyway, he said some of the legal opposition that stood up in response to that demonstrated that he can, in fact, be stopped. He added Democrats should be mounting both a legal strategy and a political strategy. I think that's smart. He said what's really important about the legal work being done, the fights that are happening in the courts, whether it's on comfortable political ground or not, is that they establish that they can be stopped. They establish when they actually are acting outside the rule of law. What I know that is in this country, you should not be stuffed into a van or picked up on the street or thrown into detention because of an op-ed you wrote or a protest you showed up at ever. That's just a fundamental thing. And, polling shows Americans largely agree with him.
Yes, so and the rule of law is bigger than Donald Trump. I know it doesn't always feel that way because he hasn't been held accountable for his own crimes, and it feels like he's abusing the rule of law every day. But the rule of law is bigger than Donald Trump, and we need to continue to preach that gospel because he is losing support, Steph. He's not gaining support. He's getting weaker, not stronger. He's getting more desperate. And I do believe when it becomes absolutely clear to everyone he's trying to kill our constitutional construct of governance, that's when, we may even see some more Republicans in Congress begin to cross the aisle to save democracy.